Come join me as we paint this fun summery cottage. Right now it's only February, it's windy, it's blustery, it's snowing, but I really felt like a little touch of summer, so we're going to paint this cute little cottage. I have available for you to download this inspiration photo. I'm going to be making some changes. I'm going to make this door kind of a teal color and the window panes, but you really could make that front door any color you want. Now this drawing I have in an 8x10, but really you can print it out any size you want. I'm actually going to be painting in a 5x7 today. We're going to start off by using a little bit of drawing gum. I'm just going to try to get out the smallest amount. We really don't need very much at all. Take my really cheap brush, get just a little wet, rub it in my bar of soap to kind of protect it so it won't get all gummy and ruined. And now I'm just going to put it in the places where I want those roses. Don't want any of the green leaves to get in there, so just going to protect that area of the painting. I'm just going to kind of go through. I might be adding a few, taking a few away from what's on my drawing, but we're just going to keep going here until all the areas that I want are protected. In the end, I added some on that white gate and on the stone wall, because I want to keep a few little highlights there on the stones. The colors that we're going to use today are Sap Green, Azo Yellow Medium, Payne's Gray, Moonglow by Daniel Smith, Burnt Sienna, Quinacridone Rose, Quinacridone Coral, Cerulean Blue, and Turquoise Blue. Now if you don't have these colors, it's totally okay. You just find a color that you think that matches. We're going to start off just kind of wetting our stone areas, the stone on the cottage and the stone on the wall. We're going to obviously be working on the stonework first. Just want little bits and pieces of that stone to kind of pop out through the roses. Some of that will get covered up by the green, but that's okay. We just kind of getting a little bit of that in place to begin with. And I'm just kind of mixing my first gray with my Payne's Gray and my Moonglow. Kind of makes a darker, more purpley color, and we're going to put our first layer on very watery. Our mixture is watery, our paper is nice and wet, so we just want that first layer to dry really lightly, because as we go we're going to kind of build that color, build the texture of the stonework and the dimension. And it always feels like when I stick this first layer on, even though it looks really pale and watery, it seems kind of harsh on that white paper. So in the beginning it kind of feels a little bit heavy. At least when I'm painting, it might not look quite like that from the camera point of view. Now I just mixed in a little bit of that burnt sienna in with that gray color, and we're just kind of mixing that in there, just letting those colors blend on the page. You just want lots of different colors and textures. Those colors kind of create those textured looks by varying them as we go. And what seems kind of dark right now will dry and it will lighten, and then all of a sudden it will feel like it's too light, and that's when we build more color. I'm just still working wet on wet, and if for some reason your painting, your paper is dried too fast, you can always just spritz it with a little bit of water, or just take a watery brush to kind of place it in there. But we still just want to work where those colors just kind of start mixing on the page. Now I'm just taking a little bit of tissue, I'm just tapping out slightly. I don't want all that color to come off. I'm just doing it really lightly, just kind of creating that stone texture. Now we're going to do the same technique on our little roof here. Just getting that wet. We're going to come in with some burnt sienna for our first layer. It's just kind of a nice pale color wash to begin with, and we'll just build the color as we go. Normally I would want to start on the door and the window first because those are going to be kind of a neat pop of color. So starting on the stonework right now, it seems so bland to me. I'm like, I just want to get to that door and to the leaf background, and it's like, oh, I got to work it. Just like, nope, we can do these subdued colors first. We will bring the bright colors in later. So just kind of working on all our color washes in the beginning are just our first layers. Kind of made my ground color with some Moonglow and a little bit of burnt sienna. And even this we will be adding to later. This is just our first layer. In the end, I will have a little grass there, so I'm just kind of bringing in a little green so it will just kind of bleed in there softly. Just adding a little variation on our roof while it's still a little wet. Bringing that a little bit into our stonework. Just continue to build the color. Don't want it everywhere. I just kind of pick here and there to just kind of tap in a little bit of that color, giving it that color variation. And I'll keep building in this shadow. Each layer I stick in, it just ends up looking so soft that I'll just kind of keep working on this area quite a bit as we go through the painting. I could have come in with a lot stronger color in the beginning so I wouldn't have to keep building quite so many layers, but this is just how I like to build the color softly. We don't know how vibrant our leaves and roses are going to be yet, so we just kind of work on each section and we can just build layers as we go to build the depth and the color that we want. Now I just took a little blue mixture there. I'm just going to put in my first layer of color in my window panes. We don't want each one to look exactly like the other, so I'm just kind of tapping it in there, letting the water that I placed in there ahead of time to kind of let it spread. We want it to kind of look like we could have some reflection going on there. I'm just going to take a little watery green, just tap it in a few places so it kind of looks like maybe there's some trees reflecting in there, and maybe our climbing rose bushes will kind of be reflecting in those windows. Now we're just going to wet this whole area here where we're going to have our climbing rose bush. This is just going to be our first layer. I'm kind of going to mix some Sap Green and some of that Azo Yellow Medium, kind of creating a brighter, lighter green, and plenty of water. I didn't draw any of the leaves in here like it showed on my line drawing. That was just to kind of give you a placement of where those leaves were going to be. I didn't want to draw out any of those leaves because I want this to be more organic and soft. And if I were to have drawn those leaves in the way my brain works, it would want to paint each leaf. So I just kind of put those more in the drawing so that you could see where they were. And I have it kind of as a reference to see where they were, but I'm just kind of getting this first layer in and not worrying too much about leaf detail. I'm just enjoying seeing. Sorry, I have a kitty in here who decides she wants to meow while I'm working. So if you hear a little squeaking off to the side, it's my little princess, my little sassy girl who wants attention all the time. And I forgot I left my studio door open, so she woke up from her nap and decided to join us. But anyway, I enjoy watching these green colors just kind of spread into each other, and as it dries in places but it's still a little wet, it kind of gives a little bit different definition. The top is still really wet, and so it's going very soft, but I actually want that. As we work on this painting, the edges are going to continue to be kind of soft and soft focused, and we're going to have more of the detail centered into where the door is and the garden gate. And I decided to kind of put these first layers in with bigger brushes so I don't get too detailed. I tend to get too detailed very easily, so using these bigger brushes are kind of helping me to add in some of that detail, but it's softer, it's bigger, and it just makes me work a little bit differently, which is what I'm trying to do these days. And this won't be the only time that we work on these leaves, but it's slowly drying, so each time I bring in a little thicker consistency of that sap green just to add in where the darks are and where you might see a little more leaf detail. Just kind of mixing up another kind of dark gray brown color. Just going to add in a little bit of detail. I've got my number 1 brush here, just kind of putting detail in here and there. I don't want to draw like full-on lines, but just kind of give that suggestion of kind of the shadows in the stonework. I really love painting stones because it really gives me the opportunity to make lots of different shades of gray and brown and create that stonework texture. I don't know what it is about doing stonework, but I just really enjoy it. You'll just kind of see me dipping into different colors just to create different shadows or different colors of shadow and dark colors. I don't want everything to be exactly the same color, so adding a little bit of that cerulean blue in there just kind of help my gray have a little bit different tone than it did for the stonework. And I just kind of decided I wanted to use a cerulean blue. It's not you could use a cobalt blue, really, or ultramarine. That cerulean really is for the mixture that I'm going to do for the door. And so I thought, well, it really makes a painting more cohesive if you use those colors on your palette with one another. So I'm not going to just use that cerulean just for the door, but adding it a little bit into my shadow mixture kind of helps tie things together in the end. So just kind of remember that when you're painting, is that you don't really want to use black, and the Payne's gray I kind of use sparingly. It's not a color I actually like very much, but because I had my stone wall and my stone cottage, I wanted to create a lot of different grays. So that's why you'll see me using a little Payne's gray, some of that Moonglow, some blue, and sometimes a little green, and it just kind of gives you lots of different options for gray. You'll kind of see on my palette there, I mix the colors, but I don't mix them, I don't overmix them. You can see them separate a little bit on the palette, and I really like that when the pigment kind of separates, and it really does give your painting more dimension, instead of just like straight Payne's gray where it's just going to look kind of gray. It's like you're going to see some of that gray, some of the blue. My Moonglow is a really wonderful color by Daniel Smith that is kind of a purpley gray. It's got some blue in it, and it really works great for shadows and making gray colors and different tones of gray. We're just going to add a little more shadow and detail into those stones. Still using my small little brush here, but it's very watery. I just slowly build, and if I want it a little darker, I'll just take a little darker shadow color and just kind of tap it into the areas that are already wet, and it just kind of spreads and makes nice little bits of shadow and texture. It's almost like you're using a watery pen, but it just gives you those soft lines without being harsh. And you can do as much of this or as little of this as you want. I just like adding in this detail. I think in the end it will really help give the dimension that I need. And so I just spend my time just kind of thinking it through, kind of working areas. And as the colors dry, they get lighter. So I kind of work these areas more than once to slowly build that depth that I want. You can see those areas are still wet, so I'm just tapping in that dark color, just letting it spread. We're just going to do a little more on our ground, just another little layer of detail, not too much, and we'll be adding a little more towards the end. But we're just slowly building this color so all our values kind of match a little bit better for the level of the painting that we're at right now. Now we're going to start mixing the color for our door. I kind of did that little color swatch so I could kind of figure out what mixture I needed to make that teal color. My turquoise is too vibrant. I added in a little bit of green, which then made it too green, so add in a little Payne's gray, and I just kind of keep mixing until I get the color that I want. And this first layer, as usual, is going to be very soft. And we can kind of continue to build the color, and if we want to change the tone a little bit and the hue, we can do that on the next layer. So I'm not too worried about this first layer being exactly the color that I want. but we're pretty close here. And I apologize for the shaky camera. My camera is attached to my table, and as I'm stirring very fast there, it just is making that table wiggle. I'm looking at getting a new art table here soon, and the one I'm currently using just is not very stable. It likes to wiggle a lot, so I apologize for the shaky photography, but you know, when you're doing art on a budget and you use what you have in your home, sometimes that's what happens, but hopefully you guys don't mind too much. Hopefully you can see how I use some of that turquoise, the cerulean, the sap green, and some of that Payne's gray to kind of create the color that I was looking for. Just taking my number 1 brush here for this portion, because I don't have much room to work with here with my window pane. Now I was kind of debating here if I wanted the sash around the window to stay white, and I kind of decided, because I didn't have that much room for detail, that I would just make the whole entire window this turquoise color. It's kind of like a deep sea green, somewhere between turquoise and green and blue. And while that first layer of our door is drying, I'm just going to add a few more little details to the leaves. Kind of taking a darker of that sap green, and because it's fully dry underneath, we're just kind of doing a wet on dry so we have control over where our leaves are going. And I'm just kind of dotting it in. I don't want leaf detail, I just want the hint of a few darker leaves. Now I'm going to kind of create a little vine color. I'm going to taking my burnt sienna, some of that sap green, a little of the Moonglow, and we don't want it to be very dark. It's just kind of a hint of those vines here and there, so it doesn't just look like our roses are just going to be floating on the page, that they're kind of attached to that house. All this soft little detail, even though it doesn't really stand out in the painting. It's like your eye kind of sees it, your brain registers it, but it's not just in your face. It's very soft. Now we're just going to kind of continue with a little detail, kind of building some colorful shadows. That roof is very dull at the moment, and we're going to be building more color on that as we go. Now that our first layer of our window and door are dry, we can kind of add in a little darker color, kind of create that 3D, that dimension. We don't need our windows to have perfect lines. We just want this to be perfectly imperfect. As we start this next layer on the door, We have our soft layer on the bottom, and as we're adding this wet on dry, it's really building that depth of the door. That color is getting deeper and richer, and this is more of the tone that I was and hue that I was going for. So I'm pretty pleased at this point. I'm really enjoying, we're really seeing the door start to come to life. And once we get those roses in, boy, they will work really nicely together. Working on that shadow a little bit more. As we built up those greens, our shadows seem pretty pale, so just adding in another thin layer. Just kind of want a transparent looking shadow. It's kind of interesting to see with watercolor how what you thought was really dark in the beginning becomes very faint and light. And even though we built some of these shadows in a previous layer, they just kind of disappeared and became more faint. So, you know, as with watercolor, you just kind of build until you're happy. You can easily do less layers and enjoy it and have a really beautiful painting. And you can add lots of layers and enjoy and have a beautiful painting. Now I'm just creating a little color to go on these little flowers in the front. I don't even know what kind of flowers they are, but they kind of grow on these long stems and they kind of pop up over the fence. So I'm just getting those stems in there, and then we will be putting the flowers on, and then another step after we get all that masking fluid off. If you look at the inspiration photo, you might be able to tell me in the comments what type of flowers those are. I'm taking my hairdryer, making sure everything is dry. It also warms up that masking fluid, and I can just rub it right off. No problems at all. I'm using 100% cotton paper, so it works really well with masking fluid, and I had no ripping, no issues at all. Comes off really easily. I hope you stuck it through that first part of the painting, and now we get to come to our roses, and that pop of color gets to come to life, and our painting is just going to start turning sweeter and sweeter. I'm using my Quin coral, and it's just kind of a really soft pink coral tone, and that's just going to be my base layer. Some of the roses will be a little darker, some will be a little lighter. And if you don't have Quin coral, you could just use a pink tone. I have my Quinacridone rose here also, and I've taken that color and just added a little bit of yellow into it to kind of give it that coral feel. So you could just take whatever pink that you would like to use and just add in a little bit of yellow to make that color. So you don't have to have all these specialty colors, but I've just found it's been a very useful color. It has a beautiful vibrancy to it that it's kind of hard to mix on your own, but I have not regretted buying that color. And I just want them to be more watery and softer as I get towards the edges. I kind of want to have that soft focused look as we get to the edge of the painting. I'm just tapping in a little more color here and there. You just can see how that coral against that nice blue door, how they just complement each other so well. and it's just turning out so darling. Now while that's kind of soaking in the paper, I'm going to just take my yellow and just put in those yellow flowers. I want my roses to still stay a little damp, but we don't need them quite as wet as they are right now before I stick the second layer of color in. So we just kind of work on this other part of the painting. Just going to add in a little more shadow, or actually we're going to just start adding in shadow into this gate, keeping it really simple. I just want a little shadow on those on that right edge, and we're really not going to mess around with that fence too much. I'll just add a little more shadow so that it kind of tones down the white, just giving it a little bit of dimension. Such small little areas there, it's kind of hard to work in the color into those small little sections. Now we're taking our Quin Rose, I'm just tapping it in a few places, just using my number 1 brush. I'm not going to add this to every single rose, but I'm just kind of tapping it in a few places, just giving it a little more dimension, gives it a little more life, just makes those roses pop just that much more. It felt like it took forever to get to this part of the painting. Even though I do enjoy painting the stonework, I love adding in these pops of color. And once again, we're back to our stone fence. I kind of mixed another gray there with our Payne's Gray, Moonglow, and a little burnt sienna, and I have just a slight amount on my brush there, and I'm just using my brush sideways, so it's almost like a dry brush. We don't want a very wet brush at all, and it's just adding a little more texture onto that stone wall. Just going to work into those little grooves one more time. I feel like we've already done this 3 or 4 times, but I just feel like it needs more dimension. Our leaves on our rose bushes are pretty dark, and so we just need that fence in the front to have a little more depth, a little more color in it to kind of balance it out. And these are the things you aren't going to know in the beginning of a painting until you get closer to the end, if you feel like you need to add a little more here and a little more there. But that's what you get to do as an artist. You get to play and make those decisions as you go. And now I'm just going to kind of create this wet little grass here. Just want it to be very soft. I don't want much detail. It's just going to add a little color and separation in between our wall and our ground. Kind of brings some more of that green down to the bottom. We have so much up at the top that it just kind of helps balance that out. We just need a little more color, vibrancy, and texture on the ground. Just keeping it very soft around the edges. But you notice most of our detail is around that door, around the roses around the door, and that's really where we want our main focus. But all these little things we do help create the balance and composition of our painting. And I'm just taking very watery green mixture, just adding a little bit on the stones. Kind of gives a little bit of that mossy feel, kind of helps separate it a little bit from the stones on the house. And most of these stony walls do have a little bit of moss growing on them. Kind of gives them a little more character. And I just wanted to build up the vibrancy a little bit more on this door. Just a nice watery wash, a little bit more vibrant than our previous washes, but as it just kind of lays on top, it just creates a little more of the color that we want. You don't need to put it in every location. We just kind of pick a few places to add that vibrancy. Because we're sticking it on there softly, we're not picking up any of that color from underneath. Now I'm just adding a watery layer of that color just in a few places in the shadow. It just kind of helps tie in all those colors, all the shadows, just makes each part of our painting kind of tie in together. So right now you could be totally done with this painting. It's finished. You can take it off the board and enjoy it, but I'm going to take it one step further. I'm going to use my 005 Micron waterproof pen. And I'm just going to show you how I can just add a little bit of detail. I'm not going to trace everything. I'm just kind of sketching, kind of lightly pressing. Like I'm not even putting full weight on this pen. It's just almost gliding softly across the page, almost where it kind of skips. You don't want any definite lines. You just kind of almost want a kind of a little scribble, just in a few little places. For me, I turn most of my paintings into greeting cards. So I scan them and send them off to be printed. And this little bit of pen work kind of helps the detail once they're printed. And I also just enjoy the look of pen work. So if this is not something you're comfortable with, then just leave it out. The painting was perfectly fine the way it was. But I just love to draw, so this was just a fun little addition that I wanted to add to this painting. Let me know in the comments if drawing on your watercolor is a good thing, a bad thing, something that you'd love to learn how to do. If it's something you're like, oh no, I'm not going there, just give me a comment. We're all different. We all enjoy different things. I'm not a watercolor purist. I enjoy lots of different mediums, and so when I can kind of join two together, it makes me very happy. I don't even question about putting in a little bit of pen work here and there. I don't do it on every painting, but I do enjoy doing it, and I'd love to know if you like doing it too. I always forget to put my little initials on there, so I made sure I did that this time. And there you have it, our cute little stony cottage with our trailing roses, our cute little teal door, our stony fence. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and that you're going to give it a try, and I hope to see you on the next one.